What's up, dudes? I'm back with another video. Today we are talking The Used. I've been a fan of The Used for a very, very long time. Obviously, they've been announced to play Download Festival 2024, so I thought it would be the perfect time to rank their albums from worst to best. For those who don't know a lot about the band, I'll quickly give you a rundown and then run through the albums. Before we jump into that, though, I will also be doing a Spotify playlist containing all of the tracks that I've recommended, sort of like a best of The Used. So if you're unsure or you haven't listened to them in a long time or you want to get into them, the link in the description will be to the Spotify playlist with all the songs that I will mention. Yeah, so let's do this. So The Used are an alternative rock band from Orem, Utah, formed in 2000. Although considered to be more of an emo style by some, I mean, they do have those elements, but they're much more experimental and heavier than the bands that they're sort of normally thrown in with. I'd say they've got more of a foothold in alternative rock than they ever really did in emo, but they definitely benefited from being associated with the same sort of bands that came out at the same time as them. But they also incorporate metal, electronic, and sometimes even venture towards a more pop style. I mean, this means they have a very interesting and varied catalogue of albums, which we will go through. They've also been, of course, very commercially successful over the years, having many of their albums certified gold and platinum. So The Used have 9 studio albums as of 2023. At number 9, it's 2017's The Canyon. So this one was produced by the legendary Ross Robinson. The band wanted to go back to basics on this album, and it might be the most raw version that you get of the band that they've ever done, certainly on record. Very different production on this album, no real compression. It sounds very natural, almost like a 70s record, sort of like a band playing in a room with minimal effects. They'd done a live album a year prior, and that was supposedly the catalyst for going in this kind of direction. Definitely an interesting album, one of their most polarizing. I can imagine this one is Marmite for the fans. I'm definitely more on the side of liking it. Like, I don't think any of these albums are bad, as you would put. I don't think they have a bad album. This is just the bottom of the pile for me. It's not one of my go-tos, but it still has some high points, and I think it's worth checking out, especially if you're a Used fan and you haven't heard it, because it's a very odd one in their sort of history of albums. Songs I would recommend from this one are Broken Windows, Vertigo Cave, and Over and Over Again. In at number 8, it's 2014's Imaginary Enemy. Quite a poppy direction on this album. I mean, there's barely any heavy guitars on it at all. These are switched out for a more groove approach, which unfortunately works half the time. I mean, this one has gang vocals, a lot more acoustic guitars, and some electronic elements. It's kind of we're in this together vibe from the vocals and a lot of sort of political overtones during some of the tracks. It's a strange one for me. I can see what they were trying to do, but I feel like it only hits on a few tracks. So those tracks I would recommend from this one are Cry, Make Believe, and Evolution. In at number 7, and this might surprise a few people, it's 2002's self-titled album, The Used. Yeah, so The Used first album, it's a good start. Obviously, The Taste of Ink was a huge hit at the time, cemented the band in the public, emo/screamo consciousness. They were there doing it before bands like My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, etc., and doing it better, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of people have fond memories of this one. I'm sure nostalgia has a lot to do with that, because I'm sure a lot of you would put this at number 1, but not being a fan of this at the time and without those sort of rose-tinted headphones on, it's not one of my favourite. It's good. I think it's really, really good, but definitely not their best, despite what people tend to say about it. But obviously, it still has some really, really high points, and overall is a very, very good listen. From this one, I would recommend The Taste of Ink, Bulimic, and Buried Myself Alive. In at number 6, it's 2012's Vulnerable. This album is a bit of a mixed bag, going away from the darker themes explored in the previous 2 albums. They're trying to be more positive on this one, and it does have a good balance between the heavier and softer side, but I feel like it pulls some of the punches that the last 2 albums really landed in respect to moving the band's sound forward and being more progressive. It feels like they took 1 step forward, on Lies to the Liars and artwork, but then 2 steps back on this one. But regardless of those things, things, I think it's still a really good album, and I think a lot of the tracks on there are well worth a listen. The songs I would recommend from this one are I Come Alive, Hands and Faces, Shine, and Getting Over You. In at number 5, it's 2004's In Love and Death. So straight away on this one, you can feel it's much more experimental and heavier than the first album was, going away from the more straight up sort of emo direction that the first record had. You know, the riffs are much more beefy. There are more screams. I also think the production is far superior on this one. Obviously, the album was written by Bert at a strange time in his life, as his ex-girlfriend, who was pregnant with his child, died from a drug overdose, unfortunately. Hence the album's title, Love and Death. And this obviously being an influence on the album lyrically. It's a really, really good album with tons of good tracks. I definitely recommend that if you haven't heard this album before, you listen to it. It's very, very good. The songs I would recommend from this are Take It Away, Let It Bleed, and Listening. In at number 4, it's 2020's Heartwork. After the super stripped down The Canyon that we previously spoke about, this one brings back the more expansive sound with the band continuing to push the envelope. They bring back the more heavy side of the band combined with electronic elements that they toyed with in the past. This album feels like organized chaos. It's like going from alternative to pop to emo, almost like you're listening to a best of album where you'll have loads of songs from like different decades from one band all put on like one CD. But it does feel like they went back to doing whatever they wanted, and it shows. All of this being a positive thing for the album, like from the songwriting to the hooks to the performance to the production. It's a really great used album, and I highly recommend, if you do want to get into them, you listen to this album. Songs I would recommend from this one would be Blow Me Away, Bloody Nose, Wow I Hate This Song, Clean Cut Hands, and The Lighthouse. Okay, into the top 3. Here we go. In at number 3, it's 2007's Lies for the Liars. Going in a much more experimental direction for this one. I mean, it has orchestral, synths, female vocals, horn sections. It's a very interesting album, especially production-wise, if you're interested in that. Have a feeling it was a tough time mixing this one because there's just so much going on. But in a great way, you know, there's more layered vocals and instruments. It's really fun going from, you know, really, really pretty places to really, really dark places with literally a moment's notice. It feels more free than the first 2 albums, like they're literally playing whatever they wanted to, and it just turned out to be these songs. This seemed to be the direction they would go over the next few albums, but it has some great songs on it. Brilliant production. I highly recommend you listen to this album if you haven't heard it and you're a fan, or if you want to become a fan, because it's absolutely fantastic. Songs I would recommend from this one are Pretty Handsome Awkward, The Bird and the Worm, Hospital, and Wake the Dead. In at number 2, it's 2009's Artwork. So this album takes elements from the previous album we just spoke about, Lies for the Liars, keeping the more interesting proggy alternative style from that. And the songs might be even more interesting on this one. They added a slightly darker tone to the band. They referred to it as gross pop, which is really cool. Dealing with a lot of the themes based around hating yourself and dealing with your own mortality. I think this album has some of the band's highest points as far as pushing the envelope goes. The songwriting, performances, the way the album's crafted, the way it fits together like a perfect puzzle. A really great used album with a lot of re-listen value. I'm always hearing new things on this album, even though I've listened to it a million times. It's really good. Again, I would recommend that you check this album out. It's fantastic all the way through. The songs I would recommend from this one are Blood on My Hands, Empty Without You, Kissing You Goodbye, Come Undone, and The Best of Me. And in at number 1, it's this year's 2023's Toxic Positivity. I mean, this album is everything that you would want from a modern used album. It's powerful, emotional, catchy as hell, not as bipolar as the previous album Heartwork was. This one feels and plays a lot more linear, dealing with themes of mental health. I think Bert captures everything in both the performance, lyrically, and the guys doing it musically. It's a whole lot of fun, sort of keeps you guessing the first time you listen to it. You're not quite sure what's going to come next. The album's very short, but that kind of makes you want more. That's the only thing I hate about the album, that it is so short. So I find myself playing the album over and over again, because by the time it gets to the end, I'm like, oh, I just want to listen to that again because it was too short. But I think this is the best version of modern day era Used, you know, pushing the envelope, also giving you little snippets of the past, you know, taking a slight glance backwards, but then looking forward to the future. It's a fantastic album, and it's great to have their latest album on the top of the pile. I really do think that this album is that good and should earn its place for me at the top, but definitely for others, definitely within, you know, the top few albums. It's fantastic. Go and listen to this one if you haven't. It's very, very good, and I'm sure they will be playing hopefully a few of these songs off of it at download as well. So the songs I recommend from this one are Numb, I Hate Everybody, Cherry, Top of the World, and Giving Up. Yeah, so there you go, guys. Those were the Used albums ranked from worst to best. I had a lot of fun doing this. I really, really like this band. It was great to go back through all the albums again, listen to them, and obviously rank them as well. I did do one of these for Fear Factory, so if you guys haven't seen that video, my last video was from worst to best Fear Factory, so go and check those out. I'm really looking forward to them playing Download Festival. I'm sure they're going to be fantastic. I'm really, really excited about it. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm really hoping to get to 2K subscribers before the end of the year, but if that doesn't happen, it's been a fantastic year for me, so I appreciate all of you watching, and as always, I'll see you dudes in the next video.